It starts with an unthinkable sight. Boxy U-Hauls stuffed with American machinery crawling north across the Ambassador Bridge at dusk. Decals flickering under cold Ontario lights, while Detroit's skyline glows a smoky orange behind them. For me, Trois-Rivières, half a century, capital rushed south or east. Tonight, it climbs into snow, scaling a tariff wall built to corral industry, not usher it out. Crates of robot arms, payroll servers, and loyalty plaques aren't fleeing danger. They're chasing arithmetic that now crowns Canada's cool incentives over Washington's heated rhetoric. Every axle thumping across customs is a secret ballot on a trade strategy that promised jobs but delivered toll slips. If tracking these quiet referendums matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Because when factories need passports just to keep breathing, what does sovereignty really mean? And whose anthem plays over the next shift horn? 48 hours after Washington added a fresh 50% duty on tool-grade steel, phones at power curbers in Salisbury, North Carolina, rang non-stop. Buyers pleaded, "Ship now, before prices explode." By midnight, the production line became a loading bay. Two 25,000-pound curb pavers, still warm from welding, were winched onto flatbeds with crates of augers and hydraulic pumps. At 11:47 p.m., the convoy rolled out, taillights glowing through Carolina humidity. Bound. Not for Atlanta, but a leased warehouse outside Toronto. Drivers were ordered to keep engines idling at customs. Burning diesel, management argued, was cheaper than letting the new tariff clock start. GPS beacons traced the journey on a laptop in the sales office. Digital heartbeats inching toward Canada. When the trucks reached Mississauga 12 hours later, paperwork read temporary storage. Yet painters had already laid bilingual safety lines, and electricians were wiring permanent chargers. Inside, technicians swapped U.S. serial plates for neutral tags that satisfy Ontario insurance rules. Plant manager Stephen Bullock called the maneuver disaster math. Every mile north erased roughly $40,000 in tariff hit, enough to pay half a year of Canadian rent and labor. Back in Salisbury, welder Tara Collins arrived for the morning shift and found the break room padlocked and an email titled Maintenance Pause. She ran a gloved hand over an idle welding arm and wondered how long a pause can last. Collins opened a local job board on her phone. Every new posting required a passport and promised a moving stipend north of the border. The message felt blunt. Follow the machines or watch them take your paycheck with them. Meanwhile, the first curb paver was already pouring sidewalks in a booming Toronto suburb. Carolina green paint, Canadian safety decals, and no country of origin on the invoice. When an emergency shipment becomes a change of address, is it still logistics or the first note of an industrial migration ballad? Barely 6 days after the North Carolina curb machines slipped north, a different silence settled over Stellantis' Brampton plant outside Toronto. The silence of tools never uncrated. The factory had been prepped for the next generation Jeep Compass, but on June 8th, the production restart was deferred pending tariff clarity. Translation: robots still wrapped in rust-brown shrink film would not awaken on Canadian soil. Yet, the surprise came from the U.S. side instead. Overnight, satellite trackers pinged a spur line in Warren, Michigan, as 5 100-ton tooling carts veered west, then crossed the Ambassador Bridge into Windsor, Ontario. Canadian Customs logged the load as temporary equipment optimization, but the receiving dock already wore fresh bilingual safety placards. Windsor's municipal utility had pre-installed high-amp feeds. A provincial grant promises to refund 45% of payroll if the line stays 3 years. Cash, electrons, and incentives braided into a golden tug rope. Inside Brampton's still dark paint shop, fluorescent bulbs flicker like exhausted fireflies over partially installed conveyors. Line supervisor Dana O'Leary traces a fingertip across dust gathering on a $1.7 million welding robot. Ordered, built, shipped, and now paused in mid-limbo. Her selfie for the Union newsletter shows her badge, a tiny maple leaf taped over the Jeep logo, "Just until we know." She jokes about stamping "shifted" on her morning coffee mug, but her eyes dart to the empty hiring board beside the time clock. Meanwhile, in Windsor, the same robot model is already sparking orange against new body panels. Local radio, Coin. The route those tool carts took, the Compass Corridor. A name equal parts marketing and warning. If a compact SUV can redraw its birthplace overnight, what anchors anything heavier? The echo back in Brampton is a question whispered between idle workstations. How long can an industrial heart hold a beat when each thump depends on tomorrow's tariff spreadsheet? While Stellantis juggled tooling, a quieter drama unfolded across the grain belt. June 12th, Moline executives stared at a CFO slide deck awash in red. Steel surcharges, lithium tariffs, and a projected $500 million bleed on Deere's 2025 balance sheet. One cell flashed green. Cab framing. Sarnia option. The math was merciless. Ship unfinished tractor cabs 420 miles to Ontario. Weld under zero carbon hydropower. Claim a provincial clean manufacturing credit. Then haul them back tariff-free under USMCA. Savings per unit, $3,480. Volume forecast, 48,000 cabs a year. Decision time, 6 minutes. By dawn the next day, a mothballed rail depot outside Sarnia thudded alive. Sparks flew from grinders shaving decades-old rails flat enough for Deere flat cars. 50 Iowa framers flew in to train local hires. Their hotel lobby smelled of welding flux and Tim Hortons coffee. At midnight, the first green and yellow cabs rose on repurposed autobody jigs, laptop screens flashing torque specs, beamed from an engineering bunker back in Illinois. Welder Jaden Polk live-streamed the inaugural weld bead to friends in Davenport. The comment scroll filled with cornfield emojis and heartbreak. "Looks like we exported the chassis, kept the paint," one co-worker joked. But nobody laughed when the Sarnia mayor announced 300 local positions, renewable after 5 years if the plant hits volume. Back across the Mississippi, the cafeteria at Deere's East Moline Works taped off rows of plastic chairs, awaiting program realignment. A jar marked Final Shift Chili Fund sat on the counter, already dusty. HR handed out FAQ sheets that recommended passport applications for future rotational opportunities. Shareholders hailed a North American optimization. Grain belt. Towns just saw another paycheck rerouted. Jaden's final post of the night showed a tractor cab rolling onto a curtain-sidered truck. Its VN still starts with 1, the U.S. identifier, but somewhere in transit, that digit loses its meaning. When birthplace becomes a line item in an invoice, can loyalty still hitch a ride on the back of a green machine headed home through foreign snow? By mid-June, the conference room at Cummins Columbus headquarters felt more like a storm shelter than a board suite. A single spreadsheet line, Block Riemann Cost Delta, Tariff Scenario 3, showed a bleed that would swallow the company's entire 2025 R&D budget. One tab over, an engineer had tucked a lifeline. Trois-Rivières Hydro Hub. Quebec's surplus river power costs a third of Indiana's peak rates, and a provincial clean industry rebate refunds 12% of every payroll dollar if an engine is remanufactured north of the 49th. 48 hours later, the first semi-trailers of scarred and sooty V12 housings rumbled out of Columbus under sunrise fog, each block tracked by a Bluetooth beacon tweeting its location like an iron heart. On the move. At the dormant Alcoa docks in Trois-Rivières, welders unbolted rusted warehouse doors and strung tricolor bunting, part welcome, part warning. Engines that once thundered through Midwestern cornfields now idled beside cold St. Maurice River. Mist awaiting new pistons. Plant manager Mireille LaRose called it adding torque to the current. She spoke over the roar of a test stand powered by hydro turbines a mile upriver, its exhaust curling into fog that smelled faintly of pine and diesel memories. Back in Columbus, cafeteria tables were folded and shrink-wrapped for renovation. But everyone understood the euphemism. Isaac Moreno, a line technician with 21 years on the clock, drove his pickup to the county BMV to renew a passport he never expected to need. "I tuned engines to cross continents," he muttered. "Now I have to cross one to tune engines." Cummins's press release praised a carbon dividend partnership. Workers translated, "When horsepower chases the cheapest kilowatt, allegiance rides shotgun." If an engine can be reborn beneath a foreign dam, yet return labeled Made for America, what keeps the next Riemann line from bolting north and taking the middle-class soundtrack with it? The tariff hike on raw aluminum hit Warwick, Indiana, like a furnace door slammed shut. Within hours of Washington's late-night decree, Alcoa technicians initiated a controlled cool, skimming molten metal into ingot molds for the last time this decade. The glow that once lit soybean fields faded to ember, and the town's night sky returned to the uncomfortable clarity of darkness. Yet 2,000 miles of track clanged alive. In Quebec's spruce-lined Baie-Comeau complex, the very ingots Washington aimed to penalize were suddenly heroes. Cheap hydroelectricity, a provincial carbon credit, and the new duties price umbrella turned each Canadian billet into a profit beacon. Alcoa's corporate dispatch diverted cancelled Warwick orders to Baie-Comeau and offered relocation bonuses big enough to cover snow tires and first-month rent. Leah Thompson, the furnace tender who once traced her family's labor lineage through Warwick's pot room, finally accepted. Her farewell photo showed heat-scarred gloves laid atop her grandfather's union badge, captioned "Same metal, new horizon." 2 days later, she messaged friends a video of northern lights shimmering above a rolling mill that hummed all night for Tennessee auto sheet customers who would never notice the detour. Freight manifests reveal a paradox. Billets leave Canada, re-enter the U.S. under USMCA, and still beat the cost curve set by the very tariff designed to protect them. Local Indiana leaders plead for relief, but the echo is lost in campaign year acoustics. Meanwhile, Baie-Comeau cafes toast a second smelting boom, espresso froth dancing in aluminum dust. When molten metal itself finds the margin in crossing a political line, does any border truly harden? Or does it melt at casting temperature, running wherever gravity and policy funnel the profit? 5 departures in 30 restless days, machinery, SUVs, tractor cabs, diesel hearts, and molten metal, all slipping north under the same flag of arithmetic. None marched out to drum lines or ribbon cuttings. They simply followed the path of least tariff, lowest kilowatt, quietest subsidy. Protection once promised renaissance, yet the ledger tells an opposite tale. Incentives and duties have spun a magnetic compass that points straight to colder latitudes. Factories can now migrate at the speed of a spreadsheet refresh. So the question lingers in every dimmed break room and every newly lit Canadian bay. How many more hometown whistles will fall silent before this policy boomerang stops mid-air? Like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below, because the next team Northbound convoy may already be assembling in the shadows of tonight's shift change.